awesome, right? But then he took it a little bit further, and he looks at the girl, he goes, if you don't take him home, I will. Which is like, just a little weird. Like, just a little like weird and creepy. And so it kind of like piqued the girl's interest a little too much. She's like, who is that? What was that about, right? Who are you? Why do people know you? And she kept asking and asking and asking. And meanwhile, with my job, I can't really tell the girl in the first 5 minutes of the interaction what I do. It gets a little too weird. Secondly, I was filming it, so I like don't want to I can't fucking, anyway. So I sort of hid that fact from her, and it made what should have been a really, really easy pull actually a very, very difficult pull. Like she gave me some really, really harsh shit tests. She was like threatening to like just walk away if I wouldn't like Google myself right then and like show her like everything about me. So yeah, but basically what it looked like I was hiding something. It looked like I had an agenda, and the fact of the matter is I did. So whatever, right? So yeah, that definitely is a big problem, right? What else? Incongruence. Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing. It's kind of like hiding something.
Yeah, exactly. Hiding something. Incongruence is saying, yeah, it's another form of lie, right? Sort of a more oblique form of lie. Yeah.
Like any sort of behavior that would make her feel judged.
Yes. Anything that make her feel judged or make her feel slutty. Right? So that's why the phrase like my place is such a big deal, right? Because like just the idea of I went to his place, it triggers like thoughts of judgment, triggers thoughts of being slutty in her head, right? Or the other one is if you escalate too much in front of her friends, right? That can be a huge, like she'll like get turned off, get like too much, whatever, because she's afraid of appearing slutty, okay? So these are the things to definitely avoid. And what you're doing here basically is you're starting to calibrate to the blueprint of a girl in general, right? You have this idea in your head, this like mental model of what is a girl. And within that model, you're sort of like saying, okay, if that's the model, how can I not offend her? How can I not push too far? How can I not give her red flags, right? So this is calibration before the fact, and on a very, very rudimentary level. How many of you guys do this? Like avoid red flags? This should be everybody in the room. Like should be everybody in the room. If it's not, we have problems. All right, like if you watched RSD videos, damn it, you should be doing this. All right, yeah.
I mean, I'd say doing that will sometimes get me back into zero, where if I'm trying to cut off every obstacle that's going to come by her feeling uncomfortable, then maybe I'll just have that platonic conversation with her and not escalate whatsoever. Gotcha,
because you're so afraid of the red flags, that kind of stuff. Gotcha. So what would be a good solution for that?
Trial and error, I guess.
What would be a good version of trial and error that we've taught like 10 minutes ago?
Level, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
What would be an even better version of that? You're almost there.
I mean, yeah, the invisible escalation, but like you have to come up with that yourself. You have to come up with your own little ways of doing it. So I guess it does go back to trial and error.
Yeah, big thing, kind of what I told him, what I'm gonna tell you, is it doesn't matter if you do it perfectly, as long as you're in the right ballpark, okay? There's a thing with, I always say like the frame controls the words in a conversation, right? So if I come up to you and approach you, and my view in my head is, I think I'm a piece of shit, I think I'm low value, I think you're gonna hate me, I really hope that you'll like me because it would mean everything to me and prove to me that I'm a man. I can be really verbally smooth and really witty and clever, it doesn't matter, because everything that comes out of my mouth is gonna be low value. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If on the other hand, I'm thinking like, I'm the shit, but not in like a try-hard way, just I'm amazing. You'd be lucky to be in a relationship with me, and if we have sex, it would be like a great experience for everybody. Or if I'm coming from that attitude, even if I'm not very smooth, the genuineness and the truth that I believe that is gonna come through in my words. And even if I fuck up a little bit, my fuck-ups will be very small. Does that make sense? Yeah. So having the right outlook, or in this case, the right idea of the calibration, it will correct most of those minor errors along the way, right? So maybe it would have been smoother to like subtly rub her shoulders and gaze into her eyes. Instead, you like, just kind of like grabbed her arm just lightly and saw if she liked that. It's not perfect. It's not as good as if you had the perfect move, but it will still work. Does that make sense? All right, cool, yeah.
How do you shift from that mentality, from this I'm a piece of shit? Because I've dealt with that. I've dealt with depression throughout most of my life. Mm-hmm. And I have moments like that sometimes, but how do you shift from that feeling to I'm the shit all the time? How do you switch from that? I'll answer briefly, but I'll also say that's a long topic that's a little off the scope of this talk, so I don't want to go too deep into it.
But the biggest two things, maybe three. One, I'd say list the positive things that you do bring to a relationship. Two, make a serious commitment that when you're with a girl, you'll try and make her life better rather than worse, because that will come through. And then the third is whenever you do have positive experiences with girls, definitely focus very much on those, and treat the negatives as learning experience, treat the positives as like internal and part of you. That's the quick and dirty answer, but that's kind of off topic a bit. All right, cool. All right, so we've now avoided red flags. We're dealing with the typical female blueprint. Now let's look at next level of calibration. This is something you guys may not be familiar with. So I mentioned before there are other ways to calibrate or other ways to escalate other than physical. Yes? All right. Let's see who knows my theory really, really well. What other ways are there to escalate besides physical? Yeah.
Logistical, verbal, and that's all I remember.
Maybe like strong eye contact, vocal tonality.
Cool. So you're basically right. It's logistical, verbal, and verbal. So you basically got them all, okay? So here are the ways that you can escalate. First is you can escalate physically, right? And that's the fun one because that's directly seems to be leading to sex, etc. Right? And we've talked about that in the invisible escalation. We talked about that with the moves you get physical, etc. Next one is logistical, right? So moving the girl from you're talking to her friends to now you're just talking to her. And then you're talking to her in isolation. And then you're sitting down with her. And then you're closer to the exit. And then you're outside. And then you're at a bar. And then you're at your place. And then you're in your bedroom, right? So that's logistical, right? Very, very important, very critical. Next one is there are two ways to escalate verbally that are very, very, very valuable. First, verbal escalation is talk about more sexual topics, right? And this one's generally pretty safe, and you can do it very, very lightly, okay? I'll give you an example. I'll actually give you an example, and I'll give you like kind of a technique that you guys can do. This is an old school pickup routine that's actually pretty good. It's called the question game. Who here knows the question game? Couple people? All right, cool. So the question game goes basically like this. If I was to play it with, who can I play? I'll play it with you, all right? So I'll just like outline the rules for you. So here's the game, all right? I'm gonna ask you questions, you have to answer honestly, and then you get to ask me a question, I have to answer honestly. That's it. That's the whole game. Now, how does that help you get laid? Someone explain to me how that actually helps you get laid.
I think the questions get more sexual at the end.
Yes, what he said, okay? Yeah. So it's not the game per se that does it, but what he said, the questions get more sexual towards the end, all right? Because you are going to choose the nature of the questions, right? If she's in a vibe with you and you ask a more sexual question, she's probably gonna respond with a more sexual question, right? It would be weird if down the road in the game you're asking like, you know, what her favorite sexual position is, and she goes like, what's your favorite color? Right? There's a disconnect there, right? And so the key to the game is that you start off asking questions that are not sex questions, but they're related to sex questions. So you don't start off with like, do you like to be fucked hard or soft? That's a little strong, all right? But you might start off with, do you have any tattoos or piercings, all right? That's just a little bit because there's that like sort of like cultural association of tattoos and piercings with things sexual, right? Or like, how old were you when you had your first drink, right? Because there's a connotation of drinking, a connotation of getting into trouble as a kid that does kind of equate culturally to sex, right? Also, there definitely is correlation between drinking and sex, right? People who drink more do have more sex, right? So you're asking these questions that are vaguely sexual, but not actually sex. And then she'll respond with something in the same vein, and then you'll ratchet it up like 10%, 15%, 20%. And then you'll ratchet it up, right? And it leads you down this path towards sex, right? And this is what I'm suggesting with escalating the topic of the conversation. So you start off talking about platonic, this random, political event, or this random thing that happened in sports, or the weather, or whatever, right? And then you're gonna talk about maybe an interesting thing that happened that was a kind of sexy political event or something like that, who knows? And then you're gonna talk about an experience you had where you were like embarrassed as a teenager or something like that. And then you'll talk about your first kiss as a teenager, and you can see where it's going from here, okay? So it's a gradual escalation of the topic in the sense that the topic itself gets more and more sexual, right? And this is a very subtle escalation, especially if it's done in stages, that almost nobody's going to resist or react negatively to, assuming that they like you and the conversation's going well. Okay? So that's one form of verbal escalation, is escalating the topic. Essentially, without saying, hey, we're going to play the question game, essentially you turn the interaction into a version of the question game. You're going to gradually escalate the topic. okay? The second form of verbal escalation is what I call escalating the pronoun, okay? Now, pronoun is I, you, we. The way instead of saying Todd, I say I, right? Or instead of saying like Todd and Kevin, I say us or we, right? Escalating the pronoun. So when you start off, if you're talking about yourself, that's very safe. No one can object to anything you say about yourself, right? It's assumed as true. If you start talking about her and essentially making statements about her, she might react to that. If I say like, you're kind of a bad girl, right? She might reject that. She might give you a shit test, something like that, right? But by talking about her, you're making it more intimate. So if we're going from I to you, it's an increased level of intimacy, right? And then the next level of intimacy increase is to go from you to we. Oh my God, what are we gonna do together? You're gonna be so bad for me, right? When you're putting the two of you together, now that's another form of escalation, okay? So that's the fourth kind of escalation, is verbal escalation of the relationship, right? Changing the pronoun in the relationship, okay? So those are the four types of escalation, and that's a very advanced escalation technique because it is very subtle. And the idea here is that you should be escalating all of them kind of simultaneously. Because when you start escalating to talking about we, it just makes sense to get physical. It would be weird if you weren't getting physical at that point. On the other hand, if you get very physical and you're still like, can't talk about anything sexual, you're talking about like just telling random stories about yourself, that's weird and incongruent, okay? So escalating all of them together makes every step of the escalation happen better, happen more easily, happen more naturally. Okay, so that's the next level, yeah.
Could you give a couple more examples of questions to ask and question A and that kind of?
Sure. Off the top of my, actually, I'll tell you what are the. So I'll actually leave it to the crowd a little bit. What are the characteristics you could ask a girl about herself that would make her more likely to be DTF that night or more likely to be pullable that night? What are the questions you guys could ask? If they're adventurous, cool.
What is your best facial feature or something like that?
Okay, interesting.
Where do you like to be kissed?
Where do you like to be kissed? Yeah, there's okay.
Do they consider themselves independent?
Do you consider yourself independent? Sure.
What are your passions?
What are your passions? Absolutely. Okay. How old were you when you had your first kiss? Sure.
How many boyfriends have you had?
How many boyfriends have you had? Yeah. Be careful with that one because you might put yourself in the boyfriend frame a little bit. But yeah, so these are all general ideas. Other good ones are anything to do with tattoos and piercings, anything with like partying, drinking, going out. Those tend to be good. Another big one is travel, particularly traveling alone or adventures while traveling, risky things while traveling, those kind of things. Another one is getting into trouble, whether it be legal or trouble in school, those kind of things, like naughty things you've done kind of. Those tend to be pretty good. And then obviously you do have the escalation of first kiss, first sex, those kind of things. You can take it to the level of threesomes and that kind of stuff if you want to. Yeah, but that's kind of a good general idea. And most of the ones that these guys threw out are pretty good as well.
Yeah, I just feel like there's like you go from like talking about your first drink and tattoos, whatever, and then you go to the first kiss, and then it's like, I feel like that's kind of a big jump.
Not necessarily. If the vibe's good, if the vibe's good and you're talking about that kind of stuff, yeah. If you ever, I'll teach you actually another technique later if you want to bridge that. Okay. There's a quote that, there's a technique I'm going to tell you in a little bit called quotes that will help you to make those big jumps. So we'll get to another technique for that as well. Does everybody understand this idea of escalating on the 4 different ways? Everybody gets it? Yeah.
You said escalate the convo towards sex.
Uh-huh.
You said escalate the pronoun. What are the other 2?
Okay, so those are the 2 verbal ones. Escalate the convo, escalate the pronoun, escalate the logistics, move her around, and then physical. Escalate physically. All right? So you want to be escalating all 4 of those ideally. And sometimes some of those may be off limits. Right? If she's around her friends, you probably won't escalate physically very much. But you can still escalate and have an intimate conversation and still have her wanting to go home with you by escalating the other 3. Right? You can still escalate the conversational topic. You can still eventually move her away from her friends, and then you can escalate physically, right? All those kind of things. I mean, if you're with her friends and her friends are just like, say you're sitting on a couch, 2 friends sitting over there talking, you're sitting on the couch talking to her, and you're whispering sexual things back and forth in her ear with her friends right there, excuse me, that's already pretty sexual. That's already pretty close to taking her home. Excuse me. And if you're doing that, sorry guys, wow. If you're doing all that, then you don't necessarily have to get super, super physical. Yeah.
So you're saying during the course of the interaction, balance all 4 times, you're saying like at any given move, you want to balance all 4 times?
Over the course of the interaction. So you want to be, generally, if things are going well, you want to be constantly escalating in really tiny ways. Does that make sense? And that escalation can occur over any of the 4 channels. Yeah.
So, like you said, this should kind of come naturally, but for the sake of practice for a beginner, would you say that you should try going through each category in a sequence, or going, a couple in one, a couple in another, a couple in another?
I really like his suggestion of making lists. Right? He said like the list of things for the question game. You said like the list of physical things. If you truly feel lost in this, I would say make a list of statements you could make that are escalating the pronoun. Make a list of statements or conversational topics that escalate towards sex. Make a list kind of in your head, because venue by venue, of places you could take her within the venue, and then have kind of an idea in your head of things you could do physically, and kind of just try and move down the list in the way that makes sense to you, right? That's a good general way to probably do it without overloading yourself. And don't be too strict about it. Don't be too worried about going the exact sequence. Don't be too worried about like making sure that you've got one step on each one and all that. It's not that exact, okay? It's not so precise, but it's good to have a general roadmap. So I do like that, and that's why I said, when you said that, I'm like, we're definitely gonna include something like that, because that's a really, really good idea. That's a phenomenal idea, yeah.
When escalating the logistics part, would you suggest escalating that as well, like, let's, I don't know, if like the example you were giving, the friends were sitting on the couch, versus me telling her all of a sudden at the end of the night, like, let's go home, just creating like this little atmospheres where there's, just like the 2 of us together. You suggest like escalating that as well, or 'cause I've seen like a difference in that, like, I've seen Tyler in some videos, he just like pulls the girl, like all of a sudden in the street, versus, escalating, being with her friends and like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I got it.
Yeah, so first of all, there are no absolutes in game. There's no like, this is the right move for that situation or this isn't, because it depends on the girl, depends on the friends, depends on the scenario, etc. I would definitely say, in general, getting the girl away from her friends is preferred to staying with the friends, but take that with a grain of salt, because it's also a place where you might get resistance, right? But getting away from the friends is generally better. And the other thing I'll say is, in general, here's a rule of game, which actually deals a lot with calibration, which is, they say, don't say what you can nod, don't nod what you can wink, don't wink what you can smile, okay? And what that really means is less is more. If you can get the same effect by doing less, it's more powerful. So if instead of yanking her away, you can just be like, hey, tell your friends we're going over here, and she tells her friends, A, it's less effort, B, it came from her instead of you, so the friends won't resist it, right? So typically, if there's a low energy, less invested way, less try-hard way to make something happen, that's the better way, right? General rules, though. No, remember, always and never. There's no always and never, okay? Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so we got the 4 levels, or four different ways that you can escalate. So let's look a little deeper. So we talked about not being creepy in general as escalating to the general female blueprint, understanding female psychology and not being creepy. Now you can take that a step further and make it actually a win for the girl, right? How can you make things a win for the girl? How do you go about doing that? Well, a way that I like to think about this is, if the girl afterwards, like after sleeping with you at night or after giving you a number, were to go tell her friends about the interaction, she's gonna go tell them the story of the interaction, what story would she tell, right? Would she like to tell the story that this like a very playerish guy came up to me and wanted to fuck me, and then like, I was just feeling horny, so I let him? Is that the story she wants to tell her friends? Yes, no? No, probably not, right? On the other hand, how about I met this guy, and at first he didn't like me, but I won him over, and it turned out we had this really great connection, and then we went home and just to talk, and then one thing led to another, and it was beautiful, right? That's like a much, much, much better story to tell her friends. So what I'm basically telling you here is 2 things. 1, be conscious of what is female psychology and what does she want from an evolutionary and social level. And then 2, constantly be asking yourself, what is the story in her head? How is this playing out for her? How is she viewing me? How is she viewing the situation? How can I make it a more positive experience for her? Okay? I'll talk about, it's kind of a weird example, but it's good in the sense that it already came up earlier. So I talked about the girl in LA who I didn't want her to find out what I do for a living, right? What do you think happens to girls when I'm talking to them and they like me and then they find out what I do for a living? Freak out? Sometimes, not usually.
Yeah. It might some like it and then others don't, right? You get like a mix.
I get a mix. I get some very predictable behaviors though. But yeah.
They're curious.
Sometimes. Yeah. Here's what typically happens. Here's what happens a lot. They get very, very intrigued. Very, very interested, very intrigued. Maybe even they view me as higher value, especially because not only am I doing it, I'm pretty successful at it. If they say like my YouTube channel, so, oh shit, that's just made people watch that video, whatever, right? So I get value out of it, they get intrigued by it. But one very, very big thing happens, which is automatically having sex with me is framed as being tricked by my tactics in their head, right? And so what I'll get is these girls that will like become massively unflaky. They'll like want to see me over and over again, but they will be like, they'll want to see me over and over again and not have sex with me. Because in their mind, the way that they win is if this guy that can have sex with everyone can't have sex with them, but still wants to see them over and over again, how could they be more high value than that, right? Social value-wise, that's like the ultimate win for them. And so that's the behavior that they exhibit, right? On the other hand, if I sleep with a girl first and then I show her what I do, now what's the paradigm in her head, or what's the story in her head? What's that? Okay. So if beforehand, if they're thinking about sleeping with me and they haven't slept with me, I'd just be another one of those girls. Afterwards, what actually happens?
Her team goes up.
Huh?
Her team goes up.
A lot of times. Yeah, chosen out of the hundreds of women. There's that. Also, if they can keep me around, they win. Right? If instead of being the next one who I just toss aside after sex, if they keep me around, they win. But if it just ends up being a one-night stand, they lose. Right? So they get massively more invested and want it to like continue and like that sort of thing. Right? So it's a much different frame. So you have to ask yourself, in this girl's mind, in this girl's viewpoint, what is winning and what is losing? And if sleeping with you is losing, try and avoid that scenario. If sleeping with you is winning, try and encourage that scenario. Right? So ask yourself, what is a win for right now for a girl in general? Down the line, we're going to talk about blueprint and what is a win for this specific girl, right? But how do you make it a win for her, right? And how can you make it a win for her? Number one is by being very high value, right? Number two is by making it a good story, right? Making it a really great story. Number three is by taking away any of the things that would make them feel slutty, right? Number four is by actually like doing things to make them chase and work for you, because people value what they work for. All right, so if you get her chasing and working for you along the way, then when she sleeps with you, she feels like she accomplished something. Whereas if you're pushing and pushing and pushing, she's resisting, she doesn't feel like she accomplished anything. She feels like she gave in and lost. Okay, so these are all little things that you can do along the way. Yeah. I'd like to, but I just kind of like, I didn't have them listed before. I just kind of listed them off. I can try. Value, good story, no red flags, and then making her chase. There you go. Absolutely. Yeah.
How do you make yourself high value?
That's a very, very good question. There are a lot of things you can do for that. Damn, that's like half of the women course right there. It really is. There's so much of that. Quick and dirty answer. How to make yourself high value without overselling yourself. The quick answer I'll give you is this. Do you guys know what the term honest signals means? Are you aware of this or not? Okay, honest signals. So honest signals are an idea from evolution, right? And the idea is there are certain things that can be faked and certain things that can't. Okay, so the typical example is the peacock's feathers in evolution. They're bright colored feathers, right? And the peahen likes that. And the peahen gets attracted to the peacock for the bright feathers. Now, why are the bright feathers attractive? It's because they can't be faked, okay? And in order to have the bright feathers, one, the peacock has to be eating a very nutritious diet. So it has to be not only surviving, but thriving, okay? Number two, because it has those bright feathers and hasn't been eaten by a predator, it means it's like extra suited to survival. Does that make sense? And so it means that the peahen will be like putting good genes inside of herself. But it's an honest signal because the peacock can't just say, oh, I'd like to have bright feathers to attract a peahen. He has to actually have those bright feathers. He can't fake it, okay? So the things that will make you appear high value without being try hard are if you can show a girl honest signals that you are a high value guy by accident, right? That's what you really want to be doing. So, for example, in theory, is having like a really like hot, expensive sports car, is that attractive or unattractive? It's attractive. Is bragging about your hot, high-end sports car attractive or unattractive? Unattractive. Is being modest and then having the girl come back to your place and when you open the garage it's just there attractive? Yeah. Yes, because you didn't brag about it and you could have.
Yeah, but you're several steps ahead. How do you like get from the first interaction?
Sure.
See
Gotcha.
how you have a fast car.
Gotcha. Right. So I'm just giving you the general principle right now. Okay. So here's another example. Say that you have a really cool job. Right. That's something you can talk about early on in the conversation. You'll talk about your job oftentimes. If you go in and you open the conversation with, I have this amazing job and I make lots of money, cool or try hard? Try hard. On the other hand, if you talk and are cool and then she asks what you do for a living and you go, I don't really want to talk about it, let's just have fun. And she's like, no, tell me for real. You're like, you really want to know? She's like, yes, please. And then you tell her, cool or try hard? Cool. You see the difference? Yeah. Okay. So the idea is that you're going to still demonstrate first of all, you're going to know what your attractive qualities are and you're going to demonstrate them, but you're never, ever, ever going to try to demonstrate them. You might create situations where they're likely to come up. You might allow her to ask about them. And if anything, make her ask multiple times and try so it looks modest. So all those things are positives. All your attractive qualities are positives, but you have them come up by accident. Does that make sense? You're structuring situations where they can come up by accident. Conceptually, okay, cool. Beyond that, a lot of your sub-communications are going to be doing this already for you, right? Like, why is talking in a loud voice attractive to girls?
It shows you can get away with talking in a loud voice.
Exactly, right? And so that implies the honest signal of social proof and social acceptance. Does that make sense? So a lot of times if you talk to a girl in a loud voice, right, that's more attractive than if you're like really quiet and right? It's more attractive to be loud and kind of like willing to put it out there and willing to risk maybe negative social, social whatever, repercussions or whatever, because the fact that you can risk it shows that when you've risked it in the past, you received a positive response, right? So it's an honest signal of high value. So the key thing in terms of being attractive without being try hard, it comes down to honest signals, right? And so that's why I teach in women. That's why we teach like the evolution psychology and what are honest signals, so that you know what those attractive qualities are and you know the ways to convey them. So, but that's the general conceptual thing, is that you want to be conveying those positive qualities by accident. Because anything that's intentional can be fake. Anything that's unintentional is treated as true, right? Similarly, take the girl in LA, right? That same example where she finds out that I'm somebody, that I'm famous or whatever. Excuse me. If I went up to her like, hey babe, I'm famous. No. But when first of all, she probably wouldn't believe it. But secondly, it's try hard, right? When a random person comes by and is like, I love your work, she believes that because it appears accidental. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
What about humble bragging? Is that also?
Yeah, the humble brag. Yeah, absolutely. So when you're downplaying a trait, which actually only serves to emphasize the trait, if you can do it properly, yeah. If you can do it in a non-cheesy way, absolutely. For example, say that I've been talking to you and we've been having a really witty conversation, right? And then I say, I'm actually pretty dumb. I'm not very educated, not very good with my words, but take me as I am. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right. As opposed to being like, yeah, I'm a witty motherfucker, right? So that's a humble brag, yeah.
I've been trying humble bragging and at times I get pity.
Sometimes you get what?
Pity from the girl, like, okay.
It has to be obviously not true, right? So like the I'm shy, if you're a total newbie and you're actually scared to talk to a girl, be like, oh, I'm shy. She'll be like, oh, it's okay. If I say I'm shy, she knows I'm not fucking shy, okay? It has to be clearly not that. You have to have clearly demonstrated it not to be the case, anything that you're saying. Absolutely. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Okay, so making it win-win for the girls, right? Next is actually figuring out the girl's particular blueprint. That's the next level. So we have this general idea of what are the traits that are attractive to every girl, right? Then if you can take it, thank you so much, that's awesome, thank you. If you can take it one step further, is this gonna explode on me, by the way? Okay, it shouldn't. Okay, fair enough. Once we've taken it to the next level, figure out what's attractive to a particular girl. So, couple just general ideas on this. Say that the girl is very educated, right? So she probably values education. She probably had good feedback from teachers. She probably had a lot of social approval from authority figures, that sort of stuff. And so she probably values that, right? So if you can make yourself a source of social approval for her, that will work really, really well. If you can indicate that you're educated in subtle ways without bragging, right, by accident, then that will work really, really well. Those types of things. Does that make sense? But the key idea here is to take it one step further and actually figure out what the particulars are for that particular girl. I'm not going to go super in depth on this one. One, because the last talk I did for New York Inner Circle was all about Blueprint, and two, because it would take a really, really long time. But I do want to point out that you can definitely do that beyond just looking at the specific or the general female blueprint. Figuring out the specific female blueprints is absolutely key. All right, there are certain times. I'll tell you one interaction I have actually in women. But I'm talking to this French girl, very educated, very smart French girl. And she, at a certain moment, just looks at me in the exact same facial expression at the exact same moment that my ex-girlfriend of 8 years ago would have done. And at that moment, I knew that she had she also fit that ex-girlfriend was German, in a similar field, came from a similar background, etc. And she gave me that same exact look of confident, kind of semi-arrogant, but also approval-seeking at just the same combination look, and immediately snapped into my head, and I knew exactly how to game her. I'm this is my ex of 8 years ago, reincarnated in front of me, and I can game her perfectly because I know this girl inside and out. Right, I know exactly what this girl values, exactly what this girl wants to be complimented on, exactly what buttons I can push with her, and it makes it very, very, very easy to game her. Right, that's an extreme example, but the more experience you have with girls, and also the more you're just attuned and paying attention to girls, you can figure out what it is that they'll do. And the way that you game a party girl who wants value, value, value is very, very different than the way you game a girl from a small town who has lived with the same friends her whole life and basically never gone out and doesn't drink. Right? It's a very, very different set of values. And yes, the same generally attractive qualities will work to an extent with both, but if you can hone in on their exact value system, you're going to be much, much, much better. Okay? So I won't go too far in that, but that's a generally good idea. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't really get what her problem would be,
Gotcha. So here, listen to the girl and solve her problem. Here's the girl's problem. Here's the fundamental girl problem. Do girls like sex? Yes. Is it slutty for girls to have sex? Yes. That's the fundamental problem. Okay? That's the fundamental problem. You have to help her solve it. And that's actually how I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't even look that closely at the slide. I'm glad you mentioned that because that is your outlook in game. Your outlook in game is they want to sleep with you. They need you to help them solve their problem. Okay? Same thing as you who are in sales, the same thing. They want to buy from you. They're talking to you because they're interested. They want you to help them solve their problem. Does that make sense? So that's the fundamental idea. You help them get out of their own way. All right, so I'll give you an example. A girl that I pulled a little while back. I took her from the club. We went to a liquor store and bought alcohol, and then went to the rooftop to go have a drink up there. And then I made an excuse to go to the apartment. And as we were going, she's like, "Where are we going?" I was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go down here and just grab glasses, but we'll go right back up." And then she's like, "The extra pit stop isn't really necessary." Right? Meaning you already I get it. It's fine, right? That's what you want to get is to the point where they are so down with it, they're so okay with it that even if they know it's a euphemism, they're just look, I don't need the extra comfort. Let's just do this. Right? So understand most of the time they're going with you not because you convinced and prodded and persuaded them. They're going with you because they like you. The excuses and euphemisms are just to help them get out of their own way. Okay? Question? You just answered it. Okay, fair enough. Good enough, yeah.
I had this situation, especially in day twos, right? If I try to tell the girl that, we can go chill at this place, if you're trying to be indirect, they kind of call you out on it. So most of the time for me, it's just being upfront and just saying that, hey, we can go get drinks at my place after this. That's worked out better.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, if that's actually worked better for you, I think you do even better if you describe the experience at your place, or describe the getting to know better or something, and be a little as in I know one more place we can get drinks where it's a little quieter, more private, and That pretty much says it, right? Or the other one that I always say is sometimes is like maybe I'll throw out some, like say maybe they're asking some interesting questions about my life or my lifestyle or something I do. I'll be like, oh, I'd love to show, actually, instead of telling you that, how about like when we get to know each other a little better, maybe I'll show you. And then later on I'm like, hey, you know, actually I'm liking you. Like I kind of want to show you this thing now. I don't know, should I? Okay, fine, why not? Right? Do you see how that like, it's just a little more subtle, right? But it still gets to the same thing. Like where else are you you're gonna show them things about your life other than your place, right? But it's just a little subtler. Yeah, like 3 questions. I'll hop down. Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but when exactly do you want to start taking initiative to start moving her around to, I don't know, the front of the room or the next table?
If you were to guess the answer to your own question, what would you guess?
When she starts giving you some kind of, I don't know, touch, I would say.
Okay. I would say as early as humanly possible, but in tiny ways. Remember the invisible escalation concept? So from the exact first moment, you'd like to start doing that, but you start doing it in really, really, really small ways, right? So it's not, hey, let's go to this crazy other place. It's just turning your body a little bit so they turn away from their friends. Like the most subtle little logistical move as